Now we're here in a slightly chilly, slightly grey and gloomy Auckland car park for a really exciting reason. Now I know there's a number of you out there who have put deposits on the MG ZS EV, and we're finally getting to drive it. The cars are heading to New Zealand. This one's actually a UK spec one that has been here for a little while doing a lot of testing. But I gather and I'm hearing that the rest of you, your cars will arrive in November. But we're going to give it a go for a couple of days, and we're going to start off with a bit of a range test. So we're going to head out into Auckland traffic, going to try and go about 100 kilometres and see what kind of efficiency we can get out of this really exciting car. Right, so we've now hit we're on the north side of Warkworth. We've done a total of 62.5 kilometres, and our consumption is exactly 16 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometres. Now, I know that there are cars out there that are more efficient. The Ioniq, for example, would do potentially that drive in less, but considering this is an SUV and that extra aero frontage and inefficiencies that brings, that is really impressive. And if you extrapolate out that from the battery pack size, this 44.5 kilowatt battery size, that means that MG's claim of 200, 250 kilometers, that's not hard. And I wasn't really trying. We weren't hypermiling here, just generally light on the accelerator, air conditioning on and off as required. If you look through the time lapse, you'll see that we at times were using plenty of power on the power gauge they have here in the car. I am super impressed. I honestly picked up this car expecting it to be a little bit inefficient, but I would not call that result inefficient. Well, I thought I'd cut the efficiency test off there, but we had a bit of an interesting result on the way home. Now, I live in Mangawai. That is really kind of my usual journey, about 100 kilometres from Auckland City. And I figured, look, the last section of that, it's very uphill, very downhill sometimes, I guess, but generally a lot of uphill. It's twisty and a bit of fun, and you tend to drive 80 to 100k an hour. And I figured it would kind of ruin our figure. But if we flick the camera around, you'll see that's absolutely not the case. We've ended up here with 15.4 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. Now, I know our average speed and so forth is a little low. There was traffic coming out of the city, and there are a few stops to film, which does tend to add things up. And we've got 144 kilometers on the guessometer. So that's a really good result. I'm just absolutely amazed at how efficient this car is. We've now gone through all that efficiency testing, and look, as I said before, we are super impressed with that result. And I had a look, and that is significantly less than what MG actually expects for the car. Their quoted consumption figures for this car is in the 18 somethings range on a mixed cycle. So for us to do 15.4 on open road with a little bit of traffic thrown in and so forth, really, really good. So what's the overall experience like of the MG ZS EV? Well, I've got to say, I've been really pleasantly surprised as to how well this car drives and how well it feels. I'm running on an open mic here. I haven't got anything special trying to dilute down the noise, and as you'll hear, there's no rattles or creaks or anything else like that going on to kind of detract from the process. Everything feels really nice, really sturdy. If I had a complaint, it's that some of the things like the door trims are a little bit hard, and that does be a little bit uncomfortable if you're one of the people like me that likes to ride along with your elbow on the side of the car. Space-wise, you've got to keep in mind this is a small, a compact SUV. It sits there in the market, kind of I'd say below the Kona in size, technically in the market, up against things like the Honda HR-V and the new Ford Puma, that kind of thing. But it feels quite spacious. So I am 6 foot and I'm a big guy, and I feel really comfortable in here. I've got enough knee room, I've got enough leg room. This seat could go back quite a bit further. It's an electric driver's seat, just so you know as well. It is great for getting comfortable. And well, I wouldn't want to sit behind myself for long. There's still room for kids or even modest sized adults in the back seat behind me. When my wife was sitting here, she is in the mid 5 foot range. There was enough room in the back that I could jump in the back behind her. So it's a really good sized car. As I will put a video in now, you can get child seats in the back. We put a big rear facing seat in there, fit perfectly well. You will only get 2 across the back. This one has 2 tether points because it's the UK spec car. The Australian spec car that we'll get here on a permanent basis has 3 tether points, but there need to be some pretty small seats to get back there. So that's really got a space. Now the boot is incredibly impressive. It has a multi-stage floor. It goes up to 470 litres of storage, 480 litres of storage. That's huge. That is a big boot. And I'll be showing some shots on the screen now. We've got a box in there, some camera equipment, and a fold-up pram. But realistically, I think you're looking at being able to get 2 to 3 fairly large suitcases in that boot if you pack them correctly. And it's a really square, usable floor. And there's still, even at that point, a little bit of room underneath for things like your charging cables, your EVSE, and so forth. So incredibly impressive in that area. Technology wise, for what you've got to passenger comfort, you've got the heated front seats, you've got this 8-inch touchscreen up here with Android Auto and a few other things in there, Apple CarPlay, sorry. You've got navigation, you've got DAB radio, I think there's only a couple of DAB channels in New Zealand, and various things to set up the car. It works pretty well. The screen is nice and responsive, the touches work well. Some of the menus, particularly around some of the vehicle settings, are a little bit clunky, but they work okay. It's got this nice feature, I think, where you've got a button here which, no matter where you are, takes you back to home on the screen, and that really does, once you've worked it out, shorten the learning curve on how to use the system. So really pretty impressed with that. If there's a niggle in there, the navigation is quite slow to start up and to run, but then, to be honest, I think most people these days are going to be using that CarPlay or Android Auto if they've got the chance to, so I'm not sure that quite matters so much. Down here we have the air conditioning. Yet again, another bit of a disappointment is that it is a manual unit, so you do have to work a little bit to make sure you've got the right temperature running around, the right feel to the climate. But conversely, I found that worked well in that it encouraged me to actually engage a little bit with the cooling system, and when I didn't need air conditioning, I turned it off. It almost actually has a bit of a plus there. I know that's an interesting way of looking at it, but yeah. Now you do have a couple of buttons down here as well. You got a mode button, so there's an eco mode, a normal mode, and a sports mode. I actually have just run the car in eco mode pretty much the whole time. You put your foot flat to the floor and you're still going to get most of the performance that's available in the car. It doesn't have a hard limiter at 90 like some vehicles do, yeah, it just changes the responsiveness of the vehicle, and it will help you, I guess, a little bit more in getting some of that efficiency out of it. You've got a KERS button. Now, KERS, what's KERS? It's regen. It's actually the name that, if you remember, Formula 1 used to use for regeneration, kinetic energy regeneration system, or recuperation system, I believe, depending on where you go. So you've got 3 choices on how hard you set your regen. Even in the highest level, it's not particularly strong. This isn't a 1-foot driving car, but it's nice to be able to vary that depending on your driving style. And then you've got a battery button down here, and what that does is it just brings up on the little information screen up here your range to empty, how far you've got to go. It's a little bit odd thing to have. I'm not sure why I need a button there, and I believe that with software updates in the future, that actually has the distance to empty meter in a slightly more prominent location on the screens to make that a little bit more functional for people. Also up front here in the little information screen, you've got your energy use, you've got the various things like how much, what the battery voltage is, what the motor voltage is, and also access to some of the information around the driver assistance features that we'll talk about in a second. So the MG has what's called MG Pilot, and I'm not going to go and suggest it's anything like Tesla's autopilot, but it is their suite of driver assistance options. So they call it ADAS, and that includes things like a autonomous emergency braking, a lane keeping system, a traffic jam alert assistance system, which follows the car in front when you're in traffic jams, blind spot detection. Now, these are things which are pretty common around the market now, but it's really good to see them in what is a relatively entry-level vehicle. They aren't perfect. I found the lane keep system in the MG just a little bit too aggressive to intervene, and I know there's been some feedback around the place on that, but overall it worked really well. And if you just want to let the car kind of do a little bit of thinking for you, you'll find that works pretty impressively. The cruise control, adaptive cruise control, worked really well. No complaints there. It's controlled mostly by the stick down here, but also there's a button on here to control it as well, which is nice to have it there. It's up to you whether you prefer to have these systems down on a separate stalk or on the steering wheel. I think it just depends on how it's activated, but overall pretty pleasing to see that from MG in this car as standard. So what is the MG ZS EV like to drive? Well, it's really good. It is, we're on a relatively quick but a little bit bumpy country road at the moment, and hopefully the camera's not shaking around too much. The ride is nice. It's not too soft, not too firm. It sounds like a bit of a cliche. It's just fine. It does really well. You've got that nice kind of stable feel from that battery being down quite low. We're just going to go across quite a bumpy bridge here, so hopefully we won't get too shaken around. The cornering is, again, fine. It's no sports car, but there's an acre of grip there. I don't have any horrible shaking coming through the steering or anything like that. It feels really well set up. Power-wise, plenty. It's 105 kilowatts and 353 newton meters of torque. So it's pretty brisk off the line around town. I put my foot down now on the open road. There's a nice meaty surge of acceleration. But it is a small efficiency car. Don't expect it to be racing off and dragging off sports cars at the traffic lights like you would, say, in a Model 3. It just gets you there pretty darn well. And I've tried it with a few people on board and a bit of a load, and really no real impact. It felt largely the same. Very, very good. You won't be disappointed with how this drives. I would suggest it drives a heck of a lot like a Nissan Leaf, like a Gen 2 Nissan Leaf. Probably a slightly nicer ride, I think. Probably slightly nicer steering, but overall just that same kind of relaxed yet urgent feel to the vehicle. Now, we've done our testing, as I said, on the road, and we worked out that in this car we would see around 260 kilometers out of a charge quite easily. That lines up really well with WLTP. Now, the battery is a liquid cooled, yes, Nissan Leaf buyers, this one is liquid cooled, lithium ion battery, 44.5 kilowatt nominal capacity, but from what we can understand, it is a 40 kilowatt usable capacity, and that should be more than enough, I think, for most people's daily use. That whole kind of 250 kilometer range, 200 if you want to go really, really safe, with no real issues. I think if you did have to go and do a big trip around having to charge it a couple of times, it will keep the battery at a decent temperature for being able to charge. Now, the other bonus this thing has, of course, is it fast charges. And so if you were to trundle down to the ChargeNet 300 kilowatt chargers down at Bombay, from my research from overseas tests, and we haven't had a chance to do it this time, I will in the very near future, you will peak out at about 79 kilowatts. Not for long, but you will get there, and that's pretty good. That certainly will assist you in getting a pretty quick top up on those DC chargers. It's CCS Type 2 if that helps, and then you have the combo port. Now, for normal Type 2 charging on a level 2 charger where the power is available, the onboard charger will operate at up to 7 kilowatts. So you are looking on a level 2 charger at about 5 hours to charge the vehicle to full. So while we don't yet know the full and final price of the MG ZSEV, though I could have a few guesses, and I'm sure you have, the launch price is incredibly reasonable at $50,100 plus on-road costs for the first 100 and something odd cars that are ordered, and I still believe you can get in there and grab a few of those. I think that is excellent value. I mean, if you look within the new car market for an EV in close to that price, you've got to step up another $10,000 to the Nissan Leaf, and I like the Nissan Leaf. I appreciate the Nissan Leaf as a really great car, and it does have a similar usable battery capacity and a similar range. But I just think you get a little more in the MG. You get a lot more space. You get that liquid cooled battery, which I think is just going to mean a lot more in the long term for longevity, and of course that ability just to get a few more fast charges out of it in a day. You've got a boot that is significantly larger. You've got an interior that is at least the equal in space, and I would argue the equal, or nearly the equal, in terms of quality and comfort. You get a few other cool things like this really nice leather interior. You've got this amazing, great, big glass sunroof that runs all the way to the back seat of the car, with a electric moving cover. I'd close that now, but we've got a camera hanging off the top. The MG really does offer quite a lot for that price, and I think it's really going to appeal to Kiwi buyers. And I also think if you look at the importance of vehicles in the scheme of the EV market, there's been some big milestones that have come through in recent years. You had the Nissan Leaf, which has been just the meat of the EV market. You've had the Mitsubishi Outlander, which has been the meat of the EV market in a different way, that it's been really attractive for fleets. And then you've had the Ioniq, which became a big fleet favorite as well, but still sold in relatively small numbers. The Kona, which was really appealing with fleets and private buyers, still relatively small numbers. And now you've got, then the Model 3, which sold in massive numbers, and now you've got this. And I think that MG has the will to get this out in the market. I think they've got the supply to get this out in the market. And I think private buyers and fleets alike are just going to eat this car up. And I think their whole pre-sale thing and how long it's taken it to get here may have turned a few people off. But once people get into the car and have a great look around in it, I think they're going to find that it's an incredibly appealing package. And I'd highly encourage you to get to an MG dealer and check it out. I don't see a heck of a lot of reason not to.